Thank you so much, Robert, for accepting to take on this mantle tonight. And Robert is going to have a team of a very experienced panelists.
We'll kick it off by Mr. Thambi, the MD for Diamond Trust Bank, giving us a synopsis before we delve into the details of this discussion. So Mr. Thambi, if you can kindly give us a synopsis of this discussion this evening.
So today we are discussing on Economic Outlook 2021. And this is just 3 slides. We know COVID-19 has overturned all our projections and aspirations in 2020. And we had 3 months of full and partial lockdown. And with all these things, an anticipated economic growth of 3 to 3.5% in 2021 is reasonably good compared to many countries. What about 2021? We know that before the COVID vaccine, COVID variants are moving from country to country. That is the position we are in. Impact out of general slow growth of the global economy. It has an impact on Uganda, weather conditions and its potential impact on the agricultural segment, uncertainty of the trade barriers between our neighboring countries. These are dependencies, or these are some of the points. And the manufacturing sector for import substitution, that is the way to go. Agricultural and agro-processing segments for regional exports. And the sector, this import substitution, that is again, that will reduce our trade deficit. And inflation outlook seems favorable in the medium term. Increased investments out of financial investment decisions expected. The challenges are increase in non-performing loans, restructuring, inability to pay, especially certain sectors like education, tourism, hospitality. We read this every day in the newspaper. Higher imports and its impact on trade deficit. This is another challenge. Impact of increased import could affect again, the same, reduced diaspora remittance. So these are the issues we have to discuss today. Let us discuss, and I am leaving it to the moderator.
Thanks, Mr. Thambi. Moving on from there, again, Mr. Thambi, based on that synopsis that you've given to us, what are the highlights and lessons from 2020 as far as the performance of the economy is concerned? What aspects of the economy did well? Which ones struggled? And probably which ones collapsed from your vantage point of view, you being in the banking sector?
Thank you for the question. And my response is that we have seen certain positive developments, what I would say negative, the positive out of negatives. Everywhere we have seen the negative about COVID-19, but the positive out of that is from the manufacturing segment. Many of our manufacturing segments, especially when we look at the special economic zones, one in Kapeka, maybe one in Bale, another one in Jinja, these economic processing zones with a 10-year tax holiday, they have done very well. And even even outside that, even Namanve or Jinja, other industrial area, everywhere we have seen that import substitution. We even initially, during the COVID, during that initial period of February, March time, we were importing masks. Within a month or two, Ugandan masks are there everywhere, and we even exported to regional export. We have seen sanitizers. We paid a lot of money for sanitizers in the first batch. Then it was available from all the sugar factories and other things. So there were the manufacturing, wherever the manufacturing has moved to import substitute and for the country's development, those are the key positive areas or the key areas of growth in 2020, even though it was only 8 months out of the 12 months. The problems we have seen mainly on the educational segment, because most of the educational institutions, they are on bank finance and their cash flow is linked with the school fee. So that entire value chain has gone. That entire value chain, now when we look at education, education is part of that education institution. There are suppliers of stationery. There are suppliers of food, maize flour, then goes to the farmers. So that entire value chain, it was severely impacted. This we have seen. Another thing, tourism. A lot of tourists used to visit Uganda, whether it is Murchison Falls or Lake Gumboro, wherever it is. But they stopped coming. Airlines, stoppage of airline, and uncertainty over this. And the problem more than Uganda, Uganda was on zero death for a couple of months when many developed and developing countries where the mortality rate was in thousands. We enjoyed that initial part, properly managed, thanks to Ministry of Health, the government of Republic of Uganda, the people cooperated. It has done very well. But what happened then? Then they started, the real movement started. So that is why this education segment, tourism, hospitality, these are the segments which has impacted very high. And we see such reports in the daily newspaper and media. So that is now where to go. Maybe this is my response to this.
Thanks, Mr. Thambi. Of course, yes, you've mentioned the sectors that didn't do well. You've talked about education, the entire value chain had more or less collapsed or has collapsed. You've talked about hospitality, you have tourism and the airline. So Wilbrod, moving on from that, because as we see it today, COVID is not something we can talk about as being in the past. It is something that we're going to live with, despite the fact that the vaccine has been discovered. It will take time for the vaccine to get to Africa. As we're saying, in part of the Western world, the vaccine hasn't been passed out to the population as quickly as anyone would have expected. So Wilbrod, how best do you think businesses can recover from the effects or the impact of COVID-19?
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you once again. Thank you, my colleagues, for the discussion. First of all, I think at a macroeconomic level, the economy is still very fragile, as you may appreciate, not just coming from the pandemic, or very much that we are still in it, but we have a couple of areas where we are falling short. You know that we have a fiscal deficit. It used to hover somewhere around 6 to 8% of GDP. Now it is at 11. Obviously, the tax authority couldn't collect in an environment where business had slowed down. We have seen public debt, higher public debt than ever. So these are challenging times, coupled with the specifics of the sectors and the impact of COVID, like my colleague Thambi has said. But in there are good things, and I think this is where your question comes in. If you notice, in spite of all these challenges, inflation has been well managed until this time. And in how to recover, we must harness those specific sectors that have either been able to recover very quickly or emerged out of the pandemic. They are IT services, of course, until recently when the internet was switched off a little bit, but it is back on now anyway. But the ICT businesses thrived quite a bit. Indeed, there was an uptake of digital financial services, obviously because travel and contacts were limited. The food businesses, and by extension, the agricultural value chain, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, like Thambi said, and even the resilience demonstrated by SMEs even during the closure. So there are quick wins there if sector-specific strategies are structured to help those ones that recovered quickly or the opportunities that have emerged have come in place. While the longer or medium-term strategies to help those sectors that are taking longer to recover, the schools, I mean, they've just gone flat out, they have struggled, they are struggling with loans. Those may need a longer-term intervention, the hospitality sector and so on. There are also good things happening in the energy sector, the oil and gas sector. I think there are final investment decisions that have come closer than before. I know the oil story has been rather long, but I think that there are indications that we are moving closer. Obviously, as a country, we must continue working very hard to portray the country and have a good image. We have finished the political season, so hopefully we have finished. We should work more on making the country a good place, not looked at in a bad light, because there's a lot of foreign investment. 60% of the equity investors are foreigners in this country, and they follow what's going on in the country. So I think as a country, we'll work hard to make sure we are viewed differently so that we are attractive to investors, including the returns that come with the investments, particularly even in simple things like treasury instruments that then allow bringing capital for us to deploy. So those are just some of the immediate things that come to my mind in this discussion.
Thanks, Wilbrod. Again, you've talked about stability in the macroeconomic environment, inflation under control, currency still under control. Now, of course, yes, 2020 was a tough year for us. We need to move forward, 2021. Mike, 2021, which key sectors do you think the audience here should look out for, whether it's for them to invest, whether it's for them to expand and do more, right? So from your point of view, your vantage point of view, you being a key person in the business sector, what are your thoughts? Can you kindly share your thoughts?
Thank you. Well, I think Thambi said it perfectly with manufacturing. Import substitution and local manufacturing is exponentially on the rise. The destruction of international transit really caused local manufacturing to rise considerably. I think last year I looked at my notes from our last year's meeting in February of 2020, and I actually had written down, COVID is going to be a great thing for the Ugandan local manufacturers. And it's exactly right. It exactly happened. The number of new factories that are happening, the number of new resources here are happening. We have the natural resources, so why not? And that's specifically for Uganda because of what our history has been in terms of imports. Another key sector to look into is financial services, especially outside the banking industry. The banking industry will need to catch up with what's happening with financial services. If you look at, there are multiple Ugandan entrepreneurs who've actually left the country because the Ugandan regulatory system is not adaptive to financial, non-banking financial systems. You see these organizations are prospering exponentially. You have two Ugandan founded organizations who've raised almost $35 million in funding to do financial services that are not direct banks that have physical locations. Neither of them exist in Uganda right now. They don't have offices here because they've moved away because of Bank of Uganda. But the opportunity exists in that sector as a very heavy investment that can be easily done. And you'll see that increase across the continent as well as the world as people go to banks less, go to physical institutions less. Other ones that really are interesting are telemedicine and telehealth. I'm sure all of us have had our scares with COVID and health reasons, and going to the hospital is a little more scary now. But telehealth is on the rise here. You have multiple institutions here who've gone away from the brick and mortar methodology where they don't have a physical location. They come to you and they provide health services. That will increase exponentially as we go along because it's one, ease of use, and two, I don't have to sit somewhere and be exposed to many people, even with or without COVID. Other things that I think where in Uganda we have an opportunity here that will require government intervention is the stoppage of physical education facilities. We've already seen one major education organization fail here and leave the country. And then you'll probably see a few more in the next year or so as the majority of education systems required physical facilities. And those that did not heavily invest in physical facilities that focused on online or rentals will prosper. As many of you know, no one's going to school anymore. And if there's an opportunity to pay fees at a slightly lower rate to not subsidize facility growth, that really helps. As I said, local manufacturing. On the other side, running from the things I'm looking away from are tourism, especially in Uganda. We have great natural resources. It's an amazing opportunity if the government were to invest in it. Sadly, the government has cut funding for tourism. The president was very clear in his addresses that tourism is not an important sector for him. The amount of investment in tourism marketing has gone down. So it's very difficult for foreign investors to come in and look at hotels, look at tourism systems, especially with the limited international travel and the requirements that are ongoing. Now, 20 years from now, yes, that will continue to grow. But in the next 5 years, it's going to be very tough in the Ugandan market because there's just not money from the government to invest in tourism growth in the country. Whereas other countries like Tanzania or especially Kenya is heavily investing in tourism as a first point of coming back to travel. Other ones that I'd be looking to run away from are real estate. The question is, I know multiple AmCham members have reduced their offices. Many don't go into the office. I think Robert, have you been in the office really for the past year? I know, other presidents like Coca-Cola doesn't go in the office much, Marsh Insurance, many people don't go in the office anymore. So why do they need these expensive facilities? And then on top of that, you're looking at URA working with groups to tax rentals even more and pressurize the property owners. While that's not a bad thing, that's actually a good thing for transparency and accountability for rentals. It actually causes a little bit more pressure on, if you want to invest in it, it's less of an opportunity to expand your real estate portfolio. So I think those are really the key ones. Wilbrod had mentioned the oil and gas sector. In my personal opinion, some of you follow me on Twitter, maybe it's over. Maybe we don't do oil and gas. Maybe it's beyond time already. You look at all the major producers are actually losing money in the oil and gas now and reinvesting their money in renewables and alternative energy sources rather than the physical oil and gas sector and moving towards solar and wind resources. So I think there has to be a discussion that has to be had about the oil and gas sector, which is above and beyond my scope, but at the end of the day, there's an opportunity there. And I think finally is the IT sector. It drives everything. We all do IT. Everybody here does IT. It's just a matter of how we look at it. So I think that's kind of where I would want to invest and where I wouldn't invest in the coming couple years here.
Oh, thanks, Mike. That has been quite elaborate. Now, of course, moving on, right? We've been focusing our discussions on Uganda, but Uganda does not sit in isolation. So, Mr. Thambi, regional markets is one of the areas that many Ugandans, and I'm sure many listeners or participants in this webinar are looking at. How best are we suited to take advantage of the regional markets in 2021? Mr. Thambi?
Yeah, sorry, I unmuted. Yeah, thank you for the question. On regional market, that is the opportunity. That is the easiest opportunity. When you look at anything, before the border closing between Uganda and Rwanda, we have seen a lot of things were moving there. And that applies to other countries also. So regional trade is very, very important. And back of it, SME growth. the SMEs are the SMEs are backbone for any economy. And that economic growth through SME, that has to be encouraged, and that has to go into the regional export. When we look at our avocado, our coffee, look at our honey, whatever we say, and still there is a lot of honey here, a lot of milk here, but what we see here, imported honey, imported milk, and everything in supermarkets. So our processed one should go to the regional market, and not only regional market, we should stop the import and we should do it more here, and we should sell it to regional market. That is the easiest one. And I think the regional trade, it has come down very much, and this has to be improved. And that will be two benefit, double benefit. One is the growth of SMEs, and we can also classify SGB, small and growing business. We can improve that for the development of the economy and also for regional trade. There is a need to identify more and more markets within the, not only East Africa. We may have to go little even to the West Africa or other countries where Uganda's products can go. That is the way we should move. And there is opportunity here, there is talent here, and there is willingness here, and fertile land. Why not? That is the opportunity.
That is great indeed. Wilbrod, any thoughts? Any thoughts you might have in addition to what Mr. Thambi has said?
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. I think just to add on what he said on the regional opportunity, we now have an airline here. So I believe that some of the destinations, the list of destinations will expand, and that gives us an opportunity to export as much as possible. But starting with the closest ones, regional provides the best opportunity, and it was best demonstrated during the tough times of COVID. And where we have comparative advantage, particularly areas like food I mentioned, or areas of manufacturing, including pharmaceuticals and others, we should be a supply point for the sub-region here, especially our neighbors, either in Sudan or Congo and so on, so that we exploit that and really give it our best. But I also agree with Mike Davis on a number of things, in that there is huge opportunity for non-bank finance. And I think this helps because if somebody, for example, brings in equity, he has a stake in the business, and the issues around the cost of financing then get addressed, at least in the initial stages. I also agree entirely that there are areas where government, as the policy-making organ, there are many areas for which it needs alignment, so that a policy signal or a policy intervention by itself does not discourage either an investor or work against the objective for which it is meant. So these are areas for us to look at. But I agree, Robert, the SMEs in Uganda have demonstrated resilience. SMEs are very fast, quick business people. When they see that this is not working, they are quick to switch to what works, and they have survived even in the toughest of times. And I think these are things that should be encouraged for the growth of our economy.
Thanks, Wilbrod. That has been quite extensive as well. But again, we can talk about regional markets. We can talk about the businesses that have done well. But on the other side, again, we have businesses that have struggled. And when you extend it further, we've seen in the Western world, whether it's the UK or the US, we've seen governments coming out to support businesses. So Mike, from your point of view, government support to businesses here, what can be made better for us to have a conducive business environment or climate in 2021?
Well, I think the government, especially the Ministry of Finance, has done a pretty good job of bringing in support for businesses during COVID. As many of you have probably seen, they're allowing multiple refinancing of distressed loans, which is great for this time because cash flows are restricted in most businesses. Even though things are moving, it's still, many businesses are restricted. One of the things I think that could be more helpful on the government side is to create policy or to implement programs, especially for SMEs. If you try to get the refinancing the money through the UDB, through Ministry of Finance and the banking system, it's actually quite difficult for small and medium enterprises to access that money, primarily because their governance isn't 100%. They're not Citibank, they're not DTB. They don't have governance systems that fully go through and have a company secretary on site. So I think that's one of the key things is a little bit more flexibility, especially with the Uganda Development Bank, to allow for SMEs to access those funds. Another thing is the funds access. We're kind of restricted to Ugandan only ownership. So if there's a portion of the company that was owned by foreigners, it was a little bit more restricted than if it was 100% Ugandan. While that is a good policy, it actually detracts from foreign investment and stops people from investing in Uganda because it's that local content methodology. Other things are, you see the government has done a great job. URSB has done a great job in general of digitization, especially turning in all of your financial forms. URA has done a good job. Sadly, URSB has stepped back a little bit and now requires a physical post office box for every business, a separate one. So you actually physically, for every new business that's registered, you have to go physically get a post office box and physically go have a little box at the post office. So those kinds of things have been very good and going there. I think another thing the government can do is slow down on the COVID-19 restrictions and interventions in terms of the physical policies, curfew, that really restricts a lot of business and make it self-control, requires self-control amongst individuals. I know why that everybody, I understand the rationale behind it, but we have to allow people to have some self-control and to allow business to go, especially restaurants, bars, hotels, those kinds of things. They'll allow that to be more easy.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I know before, I would also like Mr. Thambi to comment on that, but before Mr. Thambi comes in, and I'm sure you let the audience know that they can ask questions. Please encourage them online to send the questions through. So, Mr. Thambi, is there any thought that you can add to that? I'll also come to you, Wilbrod, on that last question of government support.
See, government support, what I would recommend is for startups. Our median age of Uganda is maybe 14 or 15 years. Our young population is very high. And these people are talented, they are educated. When we encourage them for startups, and if government supports for their startup, they can make wonders. We have seen some of the success stories in the media from Makerere University and many other universities in Uganda. These startups, they do very well with a low amount of support from government. This is one quick win we can learn, and we can reduce the unemployment on one side and some sort of innovation out of that. Of course, there are a few, but there are a lot of opportunities for that type of support to startup. Secondly, another thing on the related to it is a slightly controversial subject, but on the tax matters, recently we have seen some tax proposals, we read it in the media for cash withdrawal, 0.5% tax and all these things. So what I'm saying is we need to bring the entire cash flow to the banking system. What is happening now? The informal sector, with the effort of Uganda Bankers Association, and we already set up agent banking network. And that agent banking network is to bring the informal sector to regulated banking environment by proper KYC, by bringing their entire cash flow to the banking sector. Whereas if there is a charge, and what was the complaint? When we look at every time, when we look at any forum, there is a feel that banks are taking a lot of charges, and that is why customers prefer to keep money with them. And it is not a good practice. And banks have to come up with concessional charges. Banks have to support customers by concessional charges. And on the top of it, if we try to impose a tax on that one, I am not sure, because there is a chance of these people, those who are now moving towards from informal to formal, they may withdraw. The withdraw in the sense they will not come to the banking segment. So there is a threat on that. We have to bring people under tax bracket. That is for any economy, any developing economy, that is a basic requirement. But the tax, while bringing people under tax bracket, it has to be done with tax attraction. Because nobody should look at tax as a scary thing, as something to be high. And that is why the people may hide, suppress the transactions. This is not good for economy. The entire cash flow should come to the banking system. And that has to be done. And that is what government has to do, from the converting from informal sector to the formal sector. Of course, mobile money was a first step towards that. Then everybody thought, when mobile money comes, what will happen to the bank? Now, mobile money and bank join together, fintech companies join together. Everything is there. So the money has to come to the system. Then the cost of deposits will come down, cost of lending will come down, and the general complaint about high lending rate, that also will come down. And this is a one-stop solution. We have to encourage that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Thambi. Wilbrod, your thoughts? Wilbrod, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Very, very warm discussion. I like this, how this is going. I think that on the part of government, the issue of because this is where the decision gets wrong or right. And we should focus as a government on sectors that have maximum impact, sectors that have a huge value chain behind it, so that if focus is given in those sectors, it has an effect at the beginning. And this drives aggregate demand. It enables money percolate down to the lower, the last mile. The second area on prioritization is expenditure discipline by the government itself. I think we spend a lot on public administration. Public administration is not necessarily directly productive. And I think there are many sectors, including, for emphasis, tourism has a value chain, those who supply food, the transporters, the ones who work in hotels, and many, many others. So we must examine those sectors with a huge value chain, maximum impact, that drive aggregate demand and indeed impact at the bottom level. But I fully support Mr. Thambi that financial inclusion is critical and that we must actually act and implement on incentives that bring more people from the informal sector to the formal sector. And there is a whole national financial inclusion strategy. It's just that sometimes government does not check on its deliverables in that document, and that could have cost us some time. I also think that, and I support interventions to support non-bank finance. I know that currently nearly 96% of private sector credit is given by banks, but as I said, non-bank finance also has its advantages, at least in the initial stages. And I think we must continue working for that environment, either through the Capital Markets Authority, the Securities Exchange, and other means to attract private capital to come to the country. So that would be my take in terms of where government should focus on. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Wilbrod, for that. And do we have any questions on the line?
Robert, yes, we do have one question. Somebody was saying we should also discuss the impact of the disruption or the cutoff of internet and social media services to businesses and investment. Do you see it? I sent it.
Okay, fine. I guess the panelists have heard, and I would invite any of the panelists to give their thoughts on that.
Do you mind if I?
Yes, please, Mike.
raise the hand on here. So with regards to internet and social media services, the impact, it's more perception than anything. There's the perception that the government can step in and stop your business at any time, essentially, is detrimental to foreign direct investment. If you look at, there's been multiple organizations whose businesses essentially stopped. I mean, you have, the delivery systems that are online. You have other telehealth, teleeducation, whose systems entirely stopped because the government intervened at that point. Now, what that does is it's 1 or 2 days of revenue, 3 days of revenue, but it really creates a perception of where do you want to put your business in East Africa? Do you want to put it in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, where? And this intervention makes people look a second time at Uganda and go, maybe want to go look somewhere else. And I think that is how it affects the impact of that for FDI. And another thing, as Wilbrod was mentioning, he mentioned the attraction of FDI in the country. There's also a concerted effort now with regards to the local content bill, which is coming back up in Parliament, which actually detracts from foreign direct investment. There are no foreigners on the Uganda Investment Authority board. The new local content bill essentially stops foreign direct investment in the country by forcing local ownership of every business. So those are kinds of things that the policymakers and Parliament have tried to push, which actually slows down investment in the country and pushes investors to go to neighboring countries rather than in Uganda. And I know that we've talked about this a few times, and it's a critical component of how do you keep businesses coming here, how do you extend their value chains, and how do you create different value chains in the country. And you'll see that by the lack of brands here. You see how many hotel brands here, how many restaurant brands here, and that's why many of them have not come, is because of the inability for us to have a very clear local or a very clear foreign direct investment regulations. It's always changing. So,
sure, thank you. Yeah, we are coming towards the end of our discussion, which has been a very interesting discussion this evening. So before, of course, we end it up, I would request the panelists to come up with their parting shots.
Robert, 1 second.
Yes, please.
There was a question. Okay, yes. A statement and a question, I think. Somebody mentions that, Robert, you mentioned there are indicators that FID is getting closer. Would you please point out some to panelists? I think you would like panelists to talk about it. You mention and then they react. And then what is your take on COVID-19 impact on the economy vis-a-vis companies' readiness for the FID? It's in the chat.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for that question. Let me read again for the panelists. They're saying, you mentioned there are indicators that FID is getting closer. Would you please point out some? And then for the panelists, what's your take on COVID-19 impact on the economy vis-a-vis companies' readiness for the FID? Wilbrod, what are your thoughts on that?
All right, thank you very much. Robert, I just also wanted to touch on 1 or 2 other things, but let me start with the questions you asked. The FID and then the FDI, the direct investments. I think in running an economy, it is the duty of every leader anywhere to make your country an attractive investment destination. And therefore, all those things that work against it, you minimize it, even at the time you have interest in national content development. I know that's a very nationalistic objective and very good one at that, but you must be careful that it doesn't alienate and discourage and work against attracting foreign investors, because they have the skill, they have the money, they have the experience, they open up markets. And so there has always got to be a balance. As Davis talked about the local content bill this afternoon, we're discussing Citibank, Standard Chartered, the current bill itself would limit them from getting service providers from outside, and yet these are international groups that rely on international service providers, for example, IT. And therefore, these are matters that are being discussed. So I think we should work and through forums like this one, provide advisory to government on things that I mentioned, that inconsistency in policy can also discourage our otherwise main objectives. I also just wanted to say something on the FID. What is happening is that obviously investment decisions around the pipeline and the supporting infrastructure around it, we are coming closer. That's you know that it has taken quite a while, but there has been a lot of substantial progress in that direction. And that sends signals either to bankers, other investors, and so on to prepare. Now, your question was how we prepared in light of COVID. Well, I think that we can't give up. We cannot give up. We cannot fold our hands. If business opportunities are coming, even with COVID, you must prepare. We have learned to live with COVID. I also know that vaccines, much as the distribution may take a while, but at least there is hope around the vaccine. So I think we must continue building capacity, specialization, and above all, partnering with those who know how to do it. In Africa, there are companies that have partnered. In Nigeria, where I worked for a long time, the Nigerians partnered with huge oil companies or service providers and learned the skill, mastered the expertise that meets the standards that oil processors require. And with time, they have developed capacity. So I think that is an important aspect. The last question I wanted to just comment on, Robert, was the impact of this shutdown of the internet. Even if it was for 2 or 3 days, we cannot pretend that it did not impact. Certainly for us in the financial sector, we do way over above 2 trillion shillings daily in processing payments. I fully appreciate that perhaps there are very good security reasons for that decision, and we trust the security of our country, but we cannot pretend that it did not have economic or financial implications. And I think the most important thing is what lessons do we learn? How do we manage certain security aspects without necessarily over-interrupting financial flows and so on, so that we continue to make our country an attractive investment destination. Thank you very much.
We've just received one more question that has come in, and the participant is asking, what is the investment trend for new investors given the overview of Uganda's economic status? Thambi, do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, thank you, Robert, for that question. That is an interesting question, because one of the positives what I have seen, there are investors, they started coming. And this is not the small investors, the big boys are coming. I came to know that there is a couple of special economic zones are going to be opened in different parts of the country with huge investments. And these are all for manufacturing and import substitution. So that is coming. And there was, of course, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months back, we felt whether it is a wait and watch approach is there. No, it is not there. What we have seen, the serious investors, they have started coming. And those who have put something on hold, they started releasing and progressing on their projects. So what I have seen is a good positive outlook for the economy in that way. But for getting that into manufacturing and production, it will take a short, medium term, 2 to 3 years. So that is only delay. When we set up for example, big, this one, when I came to know there is some very big park is coming in Barara area. So it could be for processing of agro products and things like that. So when it comes to for the machinery import, its own delays, and then implementation, it will take 18 maybe or 24 months time period. But let it be. Within that is why there is a good positive on foreign direct investment. It will continue to come, because one thing maybe I can say, that the opinion about Ugandans outside the country is very good. Among East Africa, Ugandans are considered as polite people, God-fearing people with good English. And moreover, they are ready to, and at a very cheap labor. Everything is available here, fertile land. So we should not miss these opportunities. And if one is not coming, other one will come. If one door is open, one door is closed, other 3 doors will be opened. Lot more investors are coming. They will continue to come. And with their support, I think the medium to long term, according to me, very, very bright future for Uganda.
Thank you. Mike, from the American Chamber of Commerce point of view, can you supplement to what Thambi has said in 1 minute? I know we're coming close to this.
I absolutely agree with Thambi. The opportunities are here. I think that's where the Chamber, the Uganda's Bankers Association, many others have to work with the government to ensure that continued investment comes. Because if foreign direct investors are deterred through government policy, there are other places to go. Money goes to the easiest place. So how do we continue to bring investors here? As Thambi said, there's been investors coming in nonstop for the last 2 months. There are people doing the rounds. People want to invest. People want to. They just don't want to be deterred by government policy, government interventions, and certain requirements. And I think that's where organizations like the American Chamber, our individual companies, Uganda Bankers Association can help out and work with the government to ensure that foreign direct investment continues to grow and employ more people and create a larger economy for everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I know we're coming towards the end. And in case there's anyone else who has a question, we'll get your questions on the chat and then we'll try and respond to those questions after this session. So coming to the close, we have 5 minutes. A parting shot, I'll start with you, Thambi, on this.
My parting shot is go digital, go digital, go digital. That is why you can see my background also with a mobile banking and internet banking and a platinum credit card. This is not a joke. This is serious. Because in COVID, you be at home and do everything, 90% of your banking transactions from your office. And that is the way, again, it will improve. That also will improve the economic growth of this country. Thank you.
Yes, you're right, Mr. Thambi. Digital is the way to go. Without digital, it will be very hard for us to do business. Wilbrod, your parting shot, please. Wilbrod, your parting shot, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Robert, for this dialogue. Yeah, thank you for this dialogue. I think it's very rich with a lot of insights. I agree with Davis that as associations, organs, bodies, in whichever way we can, let's work very closely with government to support them in ensuring that the investment environment is right. There is a framework for allowing money come in, for resolving disputes quickly, so that this remains a very, very attractive destination for investment. Remember, investors compete and determine where money should go. And I think we need development in this part of the country. I also believe I am a strong believer in regional trade. There have been lots of bottlenecks across the region, but these are things that can be harmonized. We shouldn't give up on continuous dialogue to make the trade work. I cannot finish this session without talking about the banking industry. There is a lot for us to do. We are investing now, and that's why Thambi, my colleague, says digital banking. That's a major agenda, no doubt, with reinforcing cybersecurity around it. So those would be my parting shots, but let's work harder to do.
think we've lost. Okay, Wilbrod is done. Mike, again, as the chairman, as the president of the chamber, if you can give your parting shot and also a message from the chamber.
Okay, I think that, Thambi said it perfectly, digital. If I have to come to your physical facility, I won't come anymore. And I think that is the new paradigm for business, is how do we interact in places like this? COVID isn't going away. Vaccines don't 100% work. And just so everybody knows, you can get vaccinated and still get COVID. It's going to last for a while. So we have to move in a different paradigm. And then what it'll do is allow our transactions to be more efficient and easier. So finding ways we can do that are paramount for everybody. So thank you guys.
The DTB M24/7 app allows you to do so much more when it comes to your day-to-day transactions. It is all fun and games until your card is declined. Easily check your account balance through the DTB M24/7 app.
Use the DTB M24/7 app to buy your electricity tokens and ensure you are connected 24/7.
Pay for all your online and TV subscriptions through the DTB M24/7 app to keep the entertainment going.
Top up your airtime. You need to keep the conversation going with the DTB M24/7 app.
Transfer money from one account to another through RTGS using the DTB M24/7 app.
Easily pay your taxes to URA through the DTB M24/7 app and stay on good terms with the tax collector.
From paying your bills and paying taxes, buying airtime and transferring money, the DTB M24/7 allows you to do this and more. Download the app today and go cashless. Stay safe, go cashless.